Well, welcome to you all on Staffordshire Day. My name is Hilary and I work for Staffordshire County Council in the libraries, and it's our aim today to celebrate the great breadth of writing talent across our county, from the north, right in the north and around Stoke, right down to our most southerly tip in Kinver. We're featuring 7 authors over the day in conversation, as well as cameo pieces from several more writers from the Staffordshire area, so do look out for these. Today, I'm pleased to welcome 3 more Staffordshire authors, and they are Phil Tittensor. Perhaps you'd like to give a wave, Phil. Hi.
Hi.
We've got Lindsey Woodward. Hello.
Hello.
And Angeline Trevena. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Firstly, shall we start with Angeline? Can you tell us a little bit about the sort of books that you write?
Yeah, so I mostly write contemporary fantasy and soft sci-fi, usually with a bit of a feminist dystopian edge to it. I also write world building guides for writers, and a lot of gamers like them as well, tabletop gamers. So that's what I mostly write.
Right, I have to ask you what soft sci-fi. That's a new one.
Oh, soft sci-fi. It's hard sci-fi is like stuff set in space. Soft sci-fi is where I don't have to be quite so scientific. I don't have to explain things scientifically. So I write like a bit of cyberpunk and a bit of post-apocalyptic fiction and dystopia, because it's set in the future. It's considered sci-fi, but I don't write about spaceships.
Right, I see. Okay.
So that's basically what soft sci-fi is.
So Phil, would you like to tell us about your writing, please?
Yeah, I love the term soft sci-fi, so I suppose that makes mine hard sci-fi. A little bit of outer space, quite a lot of inner space, but set in kind of an adventure theme, if you like. So we basically go from the local area, starting off in a pub that I might just have been in 1 or 2 times, possibly in life, in Newcastle, and going through the deserts of Nubia, which is sort of southern Egypt, northern Sudan, and ending up a little bit more up kind of in an idea that's been in my psyche for a long time. And until a trip to Egypt a few years ago, I got no idea how to set it. And then the whole thing sort of came to me in one of those surreal moments on the top of a less than salubrious hotel in Aswan, overlooking the Nile. Beautiful setting. One way, not so beautiful looking the other, but it just came to me. I just ended up scribbling what became the foreword on the back of literally a napkin and a borrowed pen from a waiter, and that was it.
And off you go. And so Lindsey, are we soft sci-fi, hard sci-fi, or totally other?
Well, I would say soft, because I write love stories that have got a sci-fi or supernatural twist. So the heart of what I write really is the love story. I kind of have an idea of something mad that can happen, and then I'm just such a sucker for romance. I can't resist putting a love story into it. So it's really much in that sort of romance genre, really, but it'll be like weird things happening to normal people. It's not dystopian, it's all set in the modern world with people and places you'd recognise, but I like just putting a bit of madness in there, a bit of escapism.
So okay, that's great. So how did you get into writing, and what inspired your first book? I'll start with Phil, because you've sort of started on that with this trip to Egypt.
The setting was obviously just stunning, but I wanted some way. I didn't want to write something that was just about here's some spacefaring race that are technically more advanced than we are, and these are some of the wonderful things they can do, because it's been done before, and it's, unless you are absolutely exceptional, almost certainly it's been done better than you can do it. So really the idea was to link it to things that have happened, historical things, but going back far enough for there to be some ambiguity, shall we say. And the story that really struck me was of Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, and the way that he changed ancient Egypt over a very relatively short reign, about 14 years, and changed it completely. So not just the physical moving his capital and so on, but actually changing to one god, the sun god, from multiple gods, which was of course all changed back again by his son. And sort of playing on this juxtaposition between him and his son was quite interesting as a kind of a backstory. So the sci-fi bit had been something that had been rattling around in my head for a very, very long time. But yeah, I went through a bit of a bad patch, and the counsellor said, well, what do you do that isn't work? And I struggled, and then I started sort of talking about when I used to write music and things. He said, well, why don't you do it again? Well, not in a band, I don't really have time, the usual excuses. And then I just happened to mention this sort of mad little idea, but didn't know how to turn it into anything. And she challenged me to do it. So I'd been mulling it over, and then thought, well, actually, I've kind of now got this idea of how to set it. So yeah, let's give it a whirl.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you hadn't written fiction before? You'd obviously written.
No, I hadn't. So I'd written a couple of one-act little plays, not very good really, in the past. And other than that, my writing had really been music, lyrics, that side of thing, when it was writing for pleasure, if you like, as opposed to anything more academic.
Oh wow, that's brilliant. So Lindsey, can I ask you the same question? How did you get into writing? What inspired your first book?
Actually, writing's been this lifelong addiction I've had ever since I could first pick up a pencil. I just couldn't resist writing stories. I used to write them about the Fraggles of Fraggle Rock because I didn't want to watch the telly and watch what was going on. I wanted to write my own stories. And it's always been a hobby. And then I decided that I wanted to learn my craft, do it more seriously. So I actually went to university and got my degree in writing. And now when I'm not writing novels, I'm a copywriter. So words are my complete world. But it was about 2015 when I first thought, right, I'm going to write my first novel, and not just dabble and not just do it professionally in terms of for marketing purposes anymore. And I want to do something for me. And I felt like everything in my life had settled, and I got that sort of maturity to approach it. So it was my first book, called Bird, actually is from an idea I had as a child about a man who turned into a bird. So I took that idea, this 10-page story I'd written as a child, and turned it into a full-length novel with, of course, a love story running through it because I couldn't resist.
That's your signature.
Yes.
Oh, lovely. Oh, fantastic. And what about you, Angeline? How was your how do you first get into writing? What was your first?
Well, actually, my story is strangely similar to Lindsey's, because I also am one of those people. I've been writing ever since I was old enough to hold a pen. But it was only ever sort of like a hobby for me, and I only ever viewed it as that. And I went to university. My degree is a joint degree in drama and writing. And it was while I was at university, one of my writing tutors, I said to her, I would never imagine ever doing it as anything more than a hobby. And she said, based on your writing, that would be a real shame. And that was like the first seed that was put, that I was like, maybe I could do that. And strangely, I published my first book in 2015, just like Lindsey did. And it was actually it's a novella that I adapted from a stage play that I had written several years previously, because that's sort of where I started writing stage plays and poetry, and then I moved on into short stories, then novellas, and then finally managed to write long enough to write a novel, because my mind, because I started off in short stories, my mind sort of is on that plane, and I write very strip back. I'm very economic on the words that I use. So yeah, it took me a while to build up to the point where I could actually write a full-length novel, but now I do. So, and I've now, well, I'm just running up towards the release of my 18th book now. So,
Wow.
Yeah, doing pretty well.
So you've got the knack of it by now. Then science fiction is obviously the sort of this otherworldliness. Why do you all choose to write science fiction? Is it because you've got such huge imaginations? Is it because you can't bear the constraints of how we live now, or is it you just see the dark side of things? Over to you, Lindsay.
I think when I was younger, it wasn't a deliberate choice, but I spent a lot of time daydreaming. I'm a real daydreamer. I love just sitting there and imagining mad things happening. And when I was at school and I was boarding lessons, I used to sit and daydream and imagine these wonderful, fantastical things happening. Someone would come in and whisk me off on an adventure. And that's where kind of my imagination is all the time. I have a lot of weird dreams, like my first book, Bird, that's about a man who turns into a bird, came from a dream I had. There's always just this idea of escape at the back of my mind, and these are just the sort of nuggets that I start off my stories with. So my latest book, which is my 7th novel, is about a girl who turns invisible, and I just had this idea and I built up this rom-com around it. So it'll be these little snippets of weird ideas that have come from a little daydream or an actual dream somewhere, and then I'll build it up, and it's kind of what I now is my genre that I write in, but it kind of wasn't deliberate to begin with. It's just my weird imagination, and just follow what you want to do. I think that's really, really important as a writer. You've got to go where your heart is. So I've just done that.
Oh, brilliant. Phil, what about yourself? Why science fiction?
So there's always been that kind of fascination for something that we can't yet do, and I suppose that I guess that's something that I find in my professional life as well. It's what's the next thing? What can we do? So there's the inquiring side of it, which is why my novel does have sort of elements in it where I have had to go and research, and I've enjoyed doing that. Well, how would a faster than light drive work? Well, NASA's done some work on that, so let's go and have a look at NASA. And sort of parts of it that are set in this world. So the American military has got involved at some point. Well, how would they get involved? What bits of kit would they need? So let's go and have a look and find out. So I enjoy that inquiring side of it, as well as what can we do? And I think for me there's a moral theme that runs through. So okay, we've got our main characters who are human beings. Now, what would a human being reasonably do in this situation, and which way would they go? Would they be using some of this technology as a force for good or a force for evil? Where would it sit? What would an ordinary people like the four of us having this conversation? What would we do if we suddenly had the ability to be elsewhere in the flash of an eye, or leave the planet, or influence events? What would we do? So that's sort of an interesting thing.
Angeline, what about why sci-fi?
So when I was a child, I was lucky enough to have a local library in my town, and I was even luckier to have a fantastic librarian working there. And I worked my way through the children's section, and my favourite books were the choose your own adventure books, where at the end of each chapter you would decide what the characters would do. And I loved the fantasy ones of those, where it was all like epic fantasy battling dragons and everything. I loved them, and that love of fantasy has always been with me through my teens. That's probably when I started straying more into sci-fi. I was completely obsessed with the X-Files, still am. Yeah. And then A-level English, we had to read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and that was my fate sealed, I think, on that, and I became incredibly obsessed. I became incredibly obsessed with dystopia, and that is just my absolute favorite thing to write. I love writing dystopia, but I'll openly admit the reason I write fantasy and sci-fi is because I can't be bothered to do much research, and nobody can ever tell me I'm writing anything wrong. And honestly, I read a lot of historical fiction. I love it. I could never ever write it, and the authors who write historical fiction, like, wow. I'm so amazed by them, because it is, I couldn't do all that research. I just couldn't.
It must be lovely to have that freedom to just go into your imagination and just anything goes, doesn't it?
Yeah, like Phil was saying, science fiction and fantasy, you get the ultimate what ifs. You know, you really get to ask like crazy questions, and I just love it.
So Phil, when you're what ifs, do you ever write yourself up a blind alley because you've gone so far in your imagination that you're thinking, oh wow, I've come back off a bit?
That's interesting. There's a temptation to do things that the sort of the side of me that holds an MSc says that is purely impossible. That cannot happen. That defies the laws of physics. So there is a line to be drawn, I think. Maybe I can't actually recall a moment where I've stepped over it to the point where I've written a couple of chapters, read it back and thought, that is so far-fetched, it could not possibly happen at all, so it's got to go. But there's certainly a danger of indulging things to a degree where you'll lose the reader, and I think that was the thing that I was really intent on not happening. That I wanted to. I did it, as I say, to start off with as a therapeutic thing for me, but I think if that's all you're going to do, you're not going to be a writer. Same principle applies when I was writing music. If you're just going to write it for yourself, then you might as well stay in your bedroom. It's got to be something that other people can connect with, or else it's pointless. So there's got to be that thread, and this is why I say when there's been a bit of research, it doesn't mean that there's been 3 chapters explaining what a faster than light drive might go through, but there's probably got to be a paragraph of explanation in there, or somebody said, well, how the hell does that happen then? So I don't know if that answers your question, Hilary, actually.
No, it does. No, that does. That's interesting. Tells me about your mind a bit there. Lindsay, so you've got this romance happening in yours. So is that a human romance? Is it a human romance, or is it fantasy romance?
Oh, it's always human. It's always, all of my novels are set in the real world, in the modern world, with people just doing ordinary jobs, sort of office jobs, maybe, that sort of thing. The kind of, again, like Phil said, it's I write and I really think about the connection with the audience, and so I'll write these normal things and then just throw something crazy into the mix. Like one of my books, there's 3 friends and they've all just got normal jobs, and they meet on a Sunday in the pub, and they all love superheroes, so they create their own superhero, but then he comes to life and starts messing with their lives, and every time they think to themselves, oh, I wish that would happen, he makes it happen for them. But it's a comedy, so it's got like these ridiculous catastrophic things, and it's kind of like, be careful what you wish for is the message. But then you've got, there's a lot of love in there, as in, you wish someone would fancy you or whatever, and it all goes wrong. And so it's that normal stuff with weird things happening, and I kind of like that pure escapism. That's what it is. I don't want to challenge anyone.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. That sort of the ordinary, the everyday going over the edge kind of thing. Yeah, that's lovely. Angeline, I was looking at sort of the books that you write, and the phrase that came to mind was steampunk. Would you say that you've got an element of steampunk in there?
I do really like steampunk. I wouldn't say I've written anything that is straight up steampunk at all yet, but it is something I really like. And one of the elements that I probably do take from steampunk is the mix of magic and technology. I love mixing magic and technology together. I love having sort of like a magic system that's very rooted in the past, butting up against very futuristic technology, and that conflict between those two is something that I love putting into my dystopian world. So that is something that probably is quite borrowed from steampunk, even though I'm not strictly writing steampunk.
You're not sat there with your goggles on doing it.
No. No, but they are very cool, and I would love to write some steampunk. I probably need to read a lot more of it before I could, but I love the aesthetic of steampunk. It's very cool.
That's brilliant. So Lindsey, you've mentioned a few of your books. Can you tell us about your latest one, please? What's that one about? Is this the invisible?
Yes.
Invisible thing. So tell us about what the plot is, and without giving anything away, obviously, and tell us the title, of course.
It's called Invisible. It was the only thing I could call it. And it's a romantic comedy about a girl who is invisible. So she doesn't turn invisible. The point of the story that she wants to become visible again. So she's been invisible for about 4.5 years for reasons that are explained in the book. And then one day she's out and about and she happens to bump into this rather disgusting man, and she becomes visible again, as she can be seen. And only when she's in this horrible man's company can she be seen. So there's other things. She fancies his best friend, so you've got all the complications there, but she's got to pretend to be this man's girlfriend to kind of be convincing enough to spend all this time with him, but he makes her want to vomit because he's so disgusting. And then she's got this other sort of best friend that at work, but they've never actually met because prior to this she's been invisible, and he's desperate to meet her, and he's like secretly in love with her. So you've got this kind of trio of complications through the book, but it's purely comical.
Goodness me, that's the love triangle on another level, isn't it? On another plane, even on another dimension, probably. And that's called The Invisible, and that's out now, is it?
Yes, it came out the end of last year. Yeah, just Invisible. Yeah.
Okay. So Phil, yours is you've got a quartet of books in the series. Am I right? The Nubian.
The idea is a trilogy, but there's only one that I've actually actually done yet.
Right.
So that's Nubian Quest. So the idea, as I say, is just what a chap, relatively normal chap, although he actually specialises in professional diving. So deep sea diving. So he actually his job is to do the maintenance on things like North Sea oil rigs. So that kind of thing. So he's the central character really, and diving comes into the novel. It's a passion of mine. I dive, not professionally, but dive. So the crux of it is what happens if there is something that has enabled Akhenaten way back in ancient Egypt to do the incredible things that history tells us he managed to do, almost be in two places at once, as history suggests that he had this uncanny ability to do. And basically, if whatever it was that enabled him to do those things, what happens if they were hidden away so that things couldn't be undone by Tutankhamun or any of it, or any of the rest of the dynasty, and were entrusted to be kept. So that would maybe be by the priesthood way back, and whether that was carried on through that family for eons up until the modern day. And when you get to sort of about the 1960s, maybe then people are thinking, or the family are thinking, well, there's got to be more to living this very isolated existence, trying to keep this thing hidden. So given that they live in what is now under 60 meters of water created by the Aswan Dam to form Lake Nasser or the Nubian Sea, what happens if they decide to basically brick it up and forget about it? And then what happens if the guy who's decided to do that in his old age suffers a stroke and decides that that was probably not the best idea, and that maybe what he's actually bricked up never to be seen again could be really helpful for the human race? And then what would happen if he decided to entrust that to his son? And what would his son do with that knowledge? So if you're going 60 meters down at the bottom of the Nubian Sea, you probably need somebody who knows how to dive.
And that's where your character comes, yeah.
Absolutely. And then and so the Nubian quest sort of ends with what that particular man would do if he should find such particular interesting objects.
Yes.
And the idea of the trilogy is then taking that from, well, what kind of happens next. So Nubian Quest will sit on its own quite nicely as a standalone piece, with an option to extend it. But given that it took me probably best part of 4 or 5 years to write this one, it may be a little while before the sequel sees the light of day.
Oh, well, but you've obviously got it in your mind what's happening next.
Yes,
you've got it planned,
and it's in there. It's getting time to do it. I know it's that age-old thing, isn't it? I write prolifically, but not my stuff. My stuff has to get put on the back burner.
Yes.
So yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. And Angeline, so tell us about your latest, or
last month I released my newest novel, which is called Silkwash. It's the first novel of a new trilogy called the Cloudspan series. It's set 3,000 years after an
Are we frozen?
I think so.
Oh. Hi, Angeline. Can you hear us? Can you just tell us that bit again? Tell us about you froze then in the middle of telling us about Cloudspan. So can you tell us about your latest?
That's all right. I'll just start again. I thought I might have frozen.
Yeah. So tell us about your latest book then, Angeline.
So last month I released my newest novel, which is called Silkwash. It's the first in a new trilogy called the Cloudspans series. It's set 3,000 years after an apocalyptic event, which is where the earth cracked open and all over the globe loads of giant reptiles crawled out of the ground. They call them Titan reptilia. And where my novel is set, the particular Titan monster didn't actually manage to get out of the ground, so it's still actually trapped underground, but there's a huge crack. My main character, Mads Cole, works for a mining company, and she is suddenly transferred in her work to a secret project, and she discovers that they are actually digging towards the Titan, and there's a risk that it may escape out of the crack in the ground.
Ooh, wow. Wow, that is different. No romance in that then.
No, Well, there is a tiny bit, but to be honest, I leave writing romance up to people who can actually write romance. It's not so much in my skill set.
That's fine. No, it's easy. That's fine. That sounds amazing. So what's your preferred method of writing then, Angeline? Do you know, you said this is going to be a trilogy, a new series, so have you got post-it notes? Have you got a thing on your wall? What do you do? Do you let the Titans and the people speak for themselves? You know, do you let them develop, or do you have a plan? Are you a planner or a pantser?
I'm most definitely not a planner at all. I call myself a discovery writer because it sounds like I've made a conscious decision to write that way rather than it all just being like a happy accident. But no, I have a very vague idea of what might happen in book 2, and I know when book 3 is going to be set and who the main character is going to be, but beyond that, I haven't got a clue. I tend to just start writing and see where it takes me. By about 15,000 words into a novel, my characters take over anyway, and I just go along for the ride. But I don't even know what when I start writing a book, I very rarely even know what the ending's going to be. So
wow. That really is discovery writing, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
So it's a nice surprise to yourself.
It is, yes, it is often a very good surprise.
Lindsey, what about yourself? Do you have it all plotted out? You look very organised with the box files behind you. I'm assuming you're a plotter.
Oh yeah, I'm the complete opposite. I am a really big plotter. I normally start off with that nugget of an idea, like I said, like someone's invisible, and then I'll start. I mean, I've got about 15, 20 of these little nuggets of ideas, and then one I'll just add a little bit more to, and then slowly progress it, then start adding the characters, and I'll just have notes everywhere of, you know, what that could happen. That'd be a good twist, and I wouldn't even start writing my full breakdown until I'd really developed all these ideas. So I'll write a full synopsis then, and then I'll write a chapter breakdown and really say just roughly what's going to happen in every chapter, how's it going to develop, get that 3-act structure in place. I just love a good structure. And then when I've got sort of everything in place, that's when I'll actually sit down and write the first novel. So actually my first drafts tend to get sort of batted out quite quickly because I'm a big believer in get to the end and then worry about it after.
Yes, then start tidying it up. Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. So Phil, where do you sit on the spectrum?
Possibly a little bit in between. I mean, I'm probably more like Angeline, because I think if I'm writing up a study or something, I've got to be very precise and succinct, and you know, you're following an aim, results, discussion, conclusion kind of format.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I want to do when I'm writing a novel. So it's much more fluid. I think the other thing is that I tend to write it. I don't know whether you can see that, but I never go very far from one of my fountain pens.
Wow.
Quite a collection. This is a relatively modern one, but I have some very old ones as well. And I will actually just often take myself off somewhere with literally a nice book, writing book, nice good quality paper, fountain pen. Disappear off, get the ideas down, write quite a lot of the dialogue that way, actually, just picturing who would say what in, you know, to whom, how that would come out. And then you're doing a kind of a first edit when you start to put it on the computer straight away, and you can see you know whether you've written something that's actually reasonable or hopeless. And I find that I use the computer so much at work, as we all do, that actually just literally turning the clock back, it's something that's quite refreshing. I was really struck by Lindsey and Angeline both saying that, you know, I've written since I could pick a pen up. And and that idea of picking a pen up, it's great. We can't do it. We don't do it. You know, we might put a signature to the bottom of something, but that's about it.
You're right.
So actually, the physical thing of picking a pen up and writing a substantial piece of English in proper sentences and proper paragraphs, not just a couple of handwritten notes as an aid memoir, is wonderful. I love it.
Wow, yes, what an archive you must be building then. That's wonderful. And slightly steampunk, bringing out the old ink pen, I think there.
Well, closest thing I've got to a sonic screwdriver, Hilary.
We've had some people. We're putting this out on Facebook. We've got a Bookchat group that on the Staffordshire Library's Facebook page, and they're very prolific. We have a great following of 300 or 400 people come along to and contribute to that. And some people have sent some questions in, so I've got a really good one here for you all. Does writing exhilarate or exhaust you? So we'll start with Lindsay.
Oh, exhilarate.
Oh, good.
Because people often ask me, people especially want to write, often ask me, where do you fit in the time and how structured are you? And my answer is every spare minute I get, I'm writing. I just absolutely love it. It's my favourite escapism in itself, and I will want to get everything else done first so I can get that time to write. So to me, it's just a pure joy, and my husband will always know when I'm writing a new novel because I've just got this smile permanently etched to my face. So definitely exhilarating.
Oh, so even when you're doing the rewrites or the editing or whatever?
Oh, I love it all. I love the first draft, when even though I've planned it out, things will still happen that you didn't expect, and that's exciting. But then the editing's where you really see it polished up and coming to life, and I love the whole process. I could do it 24 hours a day.
Oh, that's brilliant! Wonderful enthusiasm. That's fantastic. Phil, what about yourself? Does it exhaust or exhilarate you?
No, it's definitely exhilarating, and that would apply to whatever I'm writing, not just novels. So I like the process. It's quite good writing with other people as well, which I do quite a bit. So you bounce ideas off each other, look at each other's drafts. And yeah, I love the process. I think people who know me well accuse me of being sort of a bit of a serial interests in things, so I will dip in and out. So I'm different to Angeline and Lindsey from that point of view. But yeah, once I'm writing something, then that is the focus. And it was the same when I was writing music. If I decided whether it was a personal project or for a band that I was writing an album, and it may take 6 months, but I'd be looking for every spare minute. And I was the same with Quest, looking for every spare minute to just develop that idea a bit further. And it's wonderful. And it's to say I do a little bit of photography. So if I'm in photography mode, then I go and I do the shoot, and then I'm sitting in front editing. Absolutely in the zone, and take you a long time over it, trying out to maybe a few hundred photos, getting 3 or 4 really nice ones. So yeah.
You just not got enough hours in your day, have you, Phil?
Well, no, I haven't actually. You asked me about what's in the pipeline, whether Nubian Quest sort of follow up. Or something else, but actually I find myself almost answering. Well, actually, there's a lovely review on a quite a rare syndrome that I've said that I will write, and I'm actually really looking forward to doing that on something called Lance Adams syndrome. So, and it's like, I really want to do this. I need to find time to write this piece.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great enthusiasm. I think that's brilliant. We can all do with that. Angeline, are you exhilarated as well, or does it sometimes exhaust you?
Definitely by my first draft. I love first drafts. Being a discovery writer is just like a wonderful adventure. Editing exhausts me. I try to love it. I have tried so many different ways to try and learn to love it, but no, it's I do find it is, yes, I find editing absolutely exhausting, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame. So we're obviously talking about Staffordshire Day. I don't know if Staffordshire inspires you, or be it coming from Staffordshire, or is anything about Staffordshire, or the view from your window. Does it anything like that inspire your writing at all? Are there any elements, local elements, that you put into your books, Lindsey?
I have to say, the one thing that I loved when I was younger, one day a new sign came up and it just said, "You are now entering Staffordshire," or "Welcome to Staffordshire," or something, and it went, "The Creative County."
Yeah.
And I just felt so proud, because I always saw myself as a writer, obviously from a young age, and to say that I come from the Creative County, it felt like maybe that's why I'm a writer, because rather than Staffordshire being an inspiration, it is who I am. It's sort of embedded in me somewhere, and I've always had that little thing at the back of my mind, like, obviously the most creative people come from Staffordshire, of course.
Of course they do. Of course. That's brilliant. Thank you. Angeline, have you got a view from your window into the wide blue yonder?
Not a wonderful one, unfortunately, but my first this is going to sound terrible, but my first post-apocalyptic book that I wrote, which is called While We Were Waiting, the idea actually came to me as I was walking down a very local street. It was a very, very cold winter's day, very early in the morning, and the street was completely abandoned. There was nobody else around at all, no cars or anything, because it was so early. And I glanced up and I just saw a building, and suddenly this story just started pouring into my head just based on that one building. And I also put a church into that story as well, which was completely based on All Saints Church in Burton that I live nearby.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yes, I'm sorry that it was post-apocalyptic, but yes, those two locations in Burton did make it into one of my novels.
And Phil, you any local touches?
Yeah,
inspirations?
I think it's nice to ground at least part of it in familiarity. And that was really important to me. So this guy, although he's my lead character, John Daverbrook, although he's a diver, actually is supposed to hail from here, from North Staffordshire. So being able to sort of use some of the places, some of the pubs that we go to, for example, where the idea sort of fermented, if you like. The fact that the Egyptian character that I alluded to earlier is teetotal and trying to get a drink of tea in a pub that doesn't serve food, and it is your typical old boozer's pub, for sort of just a little light-hearted few moments in a sort of otherwise a negotiation that was going on at that point. It's nice to be able to see that. Of course, we live in such a wonderful part of the country. You know, we've got just over the border, we've got the National Dive Centre at Stony Cove, so you can bring that in. You know, and lots of divers live in Staffordshire because there is that easy access to go and train and practice. So yeah, it was just a natural thing to do, and a few of the other places come from again, you know, a best friend that lived in Aberdeen, so know a little bit about the rigs and things and what would happen and where you would be up in Aberdeen if you happened to be working them. And another very close friend was at university in Oxford. So again, when we need a little bit of professorial assistance in the book, well, why not have a prof from Oxford? That works.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. Right. Well, I think we're almost out of time now. So I just want to thank you all ever so much for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure talking to you all, and I wish you all the very best with your new books and your old books too. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.